Hi everyone, it's Becky here. So welcome to another new video on my YouTube channel, and today I'm on my way to Burnaby Mountain. So first of all, crossing the Patalo Bridge right here. So the Patalo Bridge was constructed around the 1930s and it's about 86 years old, crossing the Fraser River connecting the Surrey area and the New Westminster area. And here we are landing on the New Westminster area, getting closer to Burnaby Mountain. Here we are arriving at the parking lot of Burnaby Mountain Park. Yeah, so because it's on a weekday, the parking lot is not too busy. And there are some abstract animal sculptures made by two Japanese artists. So the city of Burnaby here is actually a sister city with the Japanese city Hokkaido. Yeah, so finding a picnic table to sit down, I'm ready to sketch the view in front of me. So in the far distance beyond the pine trees is the city of North Vancouver, mostly. So first of all, I'm going to just draw a rectangular frame to fit everything in nice and neat. So for the drawing part, I'm using my Sailor's Fude fountain pen with a 55-degree bent nib. So this dining hall building here in the foreground is pretty important to help establish a sense of depth. Here, as you can see, I'm drawing the triangular prism shape of the rooftop. Yeah, on the bottom of the triangle here is the beam. And then on each side of the triangle, I see two wooden columns. Here's one in rectangular prism shapes. And here is the other one, a little bit higher and slightly bigger than the one on the left because it's closer. And this is the entrance to the dining hall, foreshortened, the slanting line of the staircase railing. So in the middle of the staircase, here is a little shrub. Inside, a concrete flower bed, so just drawing it. And then some grass or leaves of tulips or flowers. And then drawing this black metallic railing on the outside. I think it's for the wheelchair ramp. Just getting these vertical bars in and this horizontal bar for the lawn. Okay, and just making these lines thicker. That's a little bend. Okay, now ready to use gentle hand pressure to add the little brick texture for these two little columns supporting the front porch area. And adding little final details, accentuations for these bars and columns. Now adding on this taller shrub on the left side. It's kind of like a cone shape, nice and chubby. And then drawing the railing of the staircase on the other side. So the drawing process as well as the painting process a little later is just 2 times faster than my actual drawing speed on location because I have my own shadow projected onto the paper surface. So if I speed it up too much, it's going to look pretty shaky. I just drew those parallel lines of the staircase and the concrete fence was 3 layers of concrete bricks. Okay, now moving on to add the inner roof details. So a lot of repeating parallel lines on this eave area on the bottom of the roof. Yeah, it continues on this blank space here. Accentuate the front door of the dining hall a little bit. And same as the roof. Now behind this building of the dining hall, there's a towering pine tree. So just getting the left side of the tree done and then the right side. Using organic razor lines. To the left and right is close to symmetry, but not exactly the same. And then using these fun, lively, squiggly lines to suggest the little branches bulging out from the little bush here on the left side of the dining hall. And just doing some final little accentuations here and there for this foreground area. The dining hall with the shrubs and that pine tree towering behind. So bathing in the warm sunshine, I'm about to start drawing the foreground area. is the edge of the flower bed with all the red tulips in it. So that's the edge slanting upwards towards the right. And these thin leaves, just summarizing the big pile of the tulip leaves this way, nice and quick. Yeah, so just summarizing these tulip heads using quick and loose ovals. And the shapes of these ovals could be kind of like incomplete, giving a sense of that these tulips are swaying in the breeze. So starting from the middle ground for details like the clusters of tulips, we don't have to stress way too much on getting the perfect details done. Just keep it loose. Okay, now it's time to move on. I just drew the first pine tree. Now the second one is on a slightly lower ground, looking smaller at the same time. And the third pine tree in the middle ground. So 3 together, making up a nice sense of harmony and balance in the middle ground. Here we go. Yeah, 3 buddies. Okay, now it's time to work on the background area, which is pretty simple. The contour outlines of the layers of mountains. That's the first layer, second layer, and the third layer, the city of North Vancouver. Yeah, and my hand pressure drawing the contour outlines of the mountain ranges was pretty gentle. Because they're far away, the definitions are pretty vague. Now it's time to add some final detailing for the foreground elements. The tree here behind the dining hall and needs a little bit foliage details as well. I'm going to finish the staircase side over here. And going back to the background area again, I want to draw these fluffy clouds pretty close to the mountain ranges. Yeah, so using very gentle hand pressure so they don't look way too strong and compete with the middle and the foreground details. Now, finalizing the details in the foreground and the middle ground. So these horizontal lines dividing the flower beds and the walkway. Accentuate the railings around the staircase. And then planting these tufts of grass in the flower bed here close up. Now it's time to paint watercolors. As usual, I'm going to be using my Mungyo watercolor palette with basic 12 colors in it and my 2 Holbein water brushes. And I'm going to start with the sky area first by wetting it with clear water using my large tip Holbein water brush. Wet into wet, diluted cerulean blue. So the top layer of the sky is actually pretty concentrated cerulean blue. And keep spreading it using mostly horizontal brush marks to suggest a sense of air flowing in the sky. And starting from this middle part area of the sky, I'm starting to reload my brush with minimal amount of cerulean blue because I'm trying to create a gradient of darker shade of cerulean blue to lighter tone. So for the very top of the sky, I'm adding some retouches of cobalt blue mixed with cerulean. Yeah, a pretty loose and gentle gradient. So the sky is a gigantic dome, and the areas closer to the horizon is a faded out tone of blue because it's more far away from us. That's why the blue seems like to be faded out. Now I'm wetting the foreground area, including the flower beds and the trees and pretty much everything under the sun with a diluted yellow ochre to suggest that everything is nice and warm, bathing in the spring sunshine. Now, grabbing some pure magenta, this is actually just red from Etchr brand, to paint in these tulips. Lime green mixed with yellow ochre for the tulip leaves. And then just grabbing some viridian green and using tiny little brush marks to shade in between the leaves, just so to give more 3-dimensionality for the pile of tulips. Okay, now it's time to paint the mountain ranges, starting off with a diluted cobalt blue. And it's completely okay for the paint to go over the mountain contour outlines. Now, second layer of the mountain ranges is more of a turquoise color, cobalt blue mixed with viridian green. Yeah, so painting the mountains is a really soothing experience, playing with blues and turquoise and green. And then for the mountain in the foreground, it's pretty much just pure viridian green, but keeping it a diluted version. And these mountains are in the far, far background, many, many kilometers away. So there's no need to use very intense blues, turquoise, and greens to paint them. It's nice to keep them a little bit foggy to get an illusion of distance. Okay, time to paint the middle ground trees, starting off with a yellow-green. It's yellow ochre mixed with viridian green in a slightly diluted version. Yeah, so all the trees and shrubs here are in the same species of evergreens. So yeah, the first layer, I'm keeping it really simple. Yeah, the same yellow-green. And at the same time, I'm paying attention to the direction of the sun. I think the sun is on the left, so the right side of these trees and shrubs are shaded. So I'm going to wait for the first layer of these trees to dry off a little bit. While waiting, I'm going to paint the shadows for these clouds just on the bottom 1/3. So it's sunny but quite cloudy, and it can get pretty chilly when the cloud is overhead. So I just put my hood on and an extra jacket. Okay, so now it's time to add some retouches for the valley area. And apparently that's the city of North Vancouver. And I also want to add a little bit of slightly stronger tone of green turquoise for the mountain in the middle. Okay, but not way too strong to come forward and compete with the middle and foreground objects. Okay, now it's time to intensify these trees with a more concentrated and darker shade of green. So this is mostly viridian green with a little bit of burnt sienna mixed in. Yeah, so most of these trees are actually shaded with a pretty strong shade tone. They're almost like silhouettes. And also it's because it's around midday. The sun is not acting a lot on creating high contrast on the landscape. So actually most of these trees are kind of like dark green silhouettes. There's no distinct separation between a brighter area and the shade area, and that's okay. And just keep adding this intense green for this shrub here on top of the staircase, using little choppy brush marks to create an illusion that some little branches are sticking out from the 3D form of the shrub. And same for the smaller one here. Yeah, just shade mostly on the right side. And for the towering pine tree behind the dining hall, I'm going to keep it really straightforward and clear by just shading mostly the right side of the tree. Again, the sun is on the left. So when the contrast in the environment that you are observing is not that strong, especially around midday, when the contrast is very low, you have to make it up a little bit. So for the foreground foliage, I can see the details better, and also the light and shade conditions. I was aware that the sun is on the left, so the right side of the foreground trees are strongly shaded. For the 3 middle ground trees, the contrast is not that clear. So yeah, I just painted very loosely with mostly shade color, stronger than the mountains behind, so they really stand out. Coming forward compared to the mountains. Okay, now it's time to take a break from these trees and paint the dining hall and the staircase. Yeah, just wetting it with like a base color of super diluted yellow ochre. For the very foreground flower bed, it's mostly just soil. It's a mix and a dance of yellow ochre, and burnt sienna using loose brushstrokes, wet into wet. Yeah, and just let it dry off. Now I'm gonna grab some leftover bluish gray to paint the concrete wall here, and also the other white and gray areas, using leftover brown to paint the wooden beam and the two columns. Some more leftover gray to paint under the eave, and grabbing some leftover bluish gray to paint the right side of the two columns. As I mentioned before, the sun is on the left, just so to add more three-dimensionality, even for these very small shapes, because it's in the foreground, it needs to look a little stronger. And same for the beam and the other wooden areas, stronger burnt sienna. So the color and the tone of watercolors seem to fade away after it's dried compared to the moment when you lay it down. So now I'm adding another layer of very strong red for these tulips. And for the shadow of the trees landing on the walkway, I used cobalt blue mixed with royal purple and a tiny bit of viridian green mixed in, using two values, starting with a really light value of gray, and then wet into wet, a stronger bluish gray. And now same for the soil areas, also has the shadow from the trees, so it's a more intense sepia, which is burnt sienna mixed with a lot of cobalt blue containing less water. Now I'm doing final polish, adding these tiny little brush strokes, mostly shaded areas, yeah, in between the tulip leaves, stronger greens. And these final retouches are almost invisible, just light shade colors here and there using small brush marks. And I want to intensify the shaded area under the roof using the leftover bluish gray. Yeah. And the thickness part of the flower bed is also shaded with a kind of a dark sepia color, and that's it. Here is a look of my finished little sketch on top of Burnaby Mountain. So I've been living in Vancouver for almost 20 years now, and it's actually my first time on Burnaby Mountain. It's nice to check out here. So there's a pretty big kids playground, and I see some cherry trees. So next spring I might come back again to enjoy the cherry blossoms. And on the way home, we're passing by one of my favorite cafes, the Take 5 Cafe with a big clock in there. Yeah, so I'm a little hungry, so I'm just gonna grab a snack and my favorite caramel macchiato. Yeah, so I got a blueberry skin and my favorite caramel macchiato. So I'm gonna quickly sketch them in my sketchbook journal to record. It's actually part of my day. Yeah, so I'm gonna spend about 5 minutes to draw the blueberry skin and the paper cup, starting with the ellipse shape of the paper cup, the body part, and the liquid line with the foamy cream and the drizzle of caramel on there, and surface details, the logo of the cafe, the clocks, and drawing the organic contour outline of the blueberry skin and the wrinkles and all of these cracks, and a couple blueberries here and there as little landmarks on the terrain of the skin. So if you're sketching a muffin or any pastry item, if you imagine the surface like the surface of a new planet or a moon, it's going to be much more fun than just trying to draw a pastry item. Now, just drawing the frame for the little landscape outside. And now I'm going to start painting watercolors before eating and drinking. So guess what's the first color I'm going to use? Yes, it's yellow ochre in a slightly diluted version. Wet into wet, orange brown, and a darker brown. Quickly blending together. For the surface of the macchiato, it's a super diluted orange brown. The brim is a heavier orange brown. Now, wetting the cup area with clear water, starting with a diluted red, and the left side is away from the window, so it's a more intense red and even purple. Now, adding some more value transition and definitions for the skin, and playing with orange and burnt sienna, and as well as water control. Wet into wet, it gets this really nice and fuzzy blending effect that I always love. Yeah, so just painting the areas of the skin that got more heat in the oven with a heavier orange brown and darker brown. Now, just painting the shadows for the skin and the cup using a mix of cobalt blue and royal purple. 2 values. Yeah, so now it's time to sip my caramel macchiato. The big clock is right behind me. So over the past year or two, I've been sketching the view outside this cafe numerous times, and I just love the quaint ambience out there. Okay, so I'm gonna use my other Sailor's fountain pen with a 40-degree bent nib. Yeah, so the shape of the gable roof is very dominant. And then the shape of the main roof in a larger trapezoid, adding that top floor window and the lower floor window, like eyes looking at us, and the texture for the shingles on the main roof. Another window here on the lower floor, and some vehicles parked in front of the house. And on the lower level is actually the car repair shop. And just going back to the house to finish it with more windows, chimneys, and a shed on the right side behind. And this is one of the traffic lights and electricity post in the foreground. And these other electricity posts, they're looking shorter and shorter as they move into the distance. And the electricity wires connecting them together, the shapes of the foliage surrounding the house. And the towering pine tree, yeah. And then adding some sidewalk details, the patches of lawn, and the car in a very small abstract little shape. And then finishing these big and small shapes of the garage doors for the car repair shop. It's fun to draw. And then this part is the interior of the shop. Okay, so that's it. Now it's time to paint watercolors. Yeah, so the painting process, the speed is gonna be at real time. So this is a super quick and spontaneous 5-minute watercolor painting because my phone's battery was actually dying. So I need to speed up a little bit, but not rush it. Still using a clear system of painting watercolors in good layers. So I just wetted the sky area with clear water and putting on a little bit of diluted cerulean blue, using slightly slanting brush marks to suggest the flow of air in the sky with a little bit of value transition, just like the way that I painted the sky on Burnaby Mountain. Yeah, again, the top 1/3 of the sky is a heavier cerulean blue. And for the first layer of everything under the sky, yeah, I'm going to use my usual recipe diluted yellow ochre to show that everything is illuminated in the sun. Okay, and for the first layer of the pine tree on the upper right, it's actually a mix of yellow ochre and a tiny bit of viridian green, a muted yellow green. Because evergreen foliage in general, the color saturation is actually a little bit lower compared to other species, especially the spring trees. Now, combining lime green and yellow ochre, as well as lime green mixed with lemon yellow for these fresh spring foliage. Because I'm painting pretty fast, the yellow green is actually spreading outside the contour outlines of the canopies, and then I don't mind that. I feel like the trees are glowing with more energy like that. When you're painting, you don't have to always paint inside the outlines perfectly. Now it's time to shade these trees. The bottom half of these canopies was pretty much just pure viridian green, wet into wet, and just let gravity do the work, pulling these two color values together. And I love having a time limit just to finish it in about 5 minutes as my phone's battery was dying. Okay, now I want to just illuminate the exterior of this gray house with leftover greenish gray, because the white or gray surface is usually reflecting the surrounding colors, the foliage in this case. And then the rooftop first layer is burnt sienna with a little bit of blue mixed in, continuing using the leftover bluish gray to paint the car repair shop in the front, and more leftover grays to shade under the gable roof and the main roof and some heavier shaded areas. Yeah, and the colors and the tones of evergreen trees are not just less saturated compared to spring greens, but it's also much more heavier than the lush greens. So this is a very concentrated viridian green mixed with burnt sienna and a tiny bit of cobalt blue, using these choppy brush marks to suggest the foliage texture, the folds overlapping, leaving some spots unpainted for the highlights on those branches. And I love the happy accidents that the dark green shade color from the evergreen tree is blooming into the brown rooftop area. I love that kind of happy accident using watercolors that cannot be done with any other mediums like acrylics, colored pencils, and oil pastels. Okay, so I just painted the patches of lawn area with leftover yellow-green, intensify the shade areas for these trees' canopies, but at the same time not to overpaint, just a little bit of shade colors here and there. And final polishing stage, just adding some slightly heavier grays for the gray building of the car repair shop, as well as heavier shadows under the gable roof and the main roof. Okay, and I think those little trees on the left side, they need to have a slightly heavier green shade. So just grabbing that leftover bit of dark green, a few brush marks to intensify that, and that's it. Here's the look of my finished sketches. It's a lovely narrative and memory of the last day of April 2024. So thank you so much for watching this video, everyone. If you like it, please click like and leave me a comment below. Subscribe to my channel for weekly updates. And it's time to go home through the Patullo Bridge. And on the right side is the Port Mann Bridge that I sketched last autumn at New Westminster Quayside. So see you soon next time, everyone. Enjoy the coming of spring. Bye.